I'm Cecilia.
I'm Alexandra.
And this is Shelf Absorbed.
For this one, we read Phantasma, which is pretty popular on the internet right now. It's book 1 in a series called Wicked Games. The second one comes out in April, I think. So this is a dark fantasy romance. We are going to talk about it in the second half and just discuss our thoughts, the theme within it, what we thought about the book overall. But for the first half, we have our first guest of season 2. If you're watching video, you can already see her.
Yes, I'm so excited. Our
Surprise.
guest today is Chrissy Stevenson. Chrissy is an active reader. She's a member of all the bookish, book talk, bookstagram communities. Her favorite genres include monster romance, horror, and then any kind of high fantasy and any kind of book where the people are doing it. So we love the spicy content. Her love for reading has actually encouraged her to pursue narration, which is really exciting. So there have been novels that she's been consulting on that are set to release on Audible very soon, which is very exciting. So I'm so happy to have you here, Chrissy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was so nice. I'm very excited. As you guys know, I do listen to and watch. Specifically, I'll have it like on my screen at work. If someone walks in, I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Don't look over there. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm just really thankful.
What is your book talk, your ad, so people can follow you?
Oh gosh. Okay. So on Instagram and TikTok, it's both sugar and smut. So it's sugar.n.smut. And then if you do want to follow my narration, it is Daisy Morgan _narrates. And if that's wrong, I'm so sorry. Just look up Daisy Morgan because I had to make multiple different ones for different things.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you so much. And yeah, those are the best places to follow me. And especially if you are interested in the narrating, I do try to put up clips as I can. If it's not something that I've scripted myself for fun little erotica, then I have to make sure that the author that I'm working with is okay with me sharing clips, so that there's been a few that I've put up so far.
Oh, the other thing I want to plug too is that not only does Chrissy have the narration, the book talk, the bookstagram, she also has an Etsy store where you can buy bookish merch, which is very cool. It's called Morally Grey Designs. You can find that on Instagram also at the same handle. And if you go to Etsy and you type in Morally Grey Design.
Right now I sell designs that I've made that if you are a DIYer, you can download them and get them whether you use a Cricut, Glowforge, or something like that. In the future, I would love to actually sell physical stuff. There's just a lot more like capital and things that come in with that.
How did you get into the narration? Like, do you get to select the books you want to do? Do you do them based on, or just like authors reaching out?
So I had been thinking about doing narration for a long time. And I don't know, just something possessed me. And I was like, I'm Googling this. So there's a few different places you can work through, but I did choose ACX, which is the Amazon/Audible marketplace, talent marketplace. So through there, I do audition for books that I think are interesting. And I do lean towards romance and erotica just because those are things that interest me. And if I'm going to be spending many, many hours recording something, I think it should be something that interests me.
Yeah.
However, currently, on contract, like currently we're in the works. I have one romance novel. I just accepted one for a thriller / like suspense, but there is a little bit of like, it kind of teases you as like a romance novel, and then you're like, ooh, wait a minute, this is crazy. And then I have a short story that is a mouthful. It is truly a splatterpunk horror erotica. So it's all the things, and it is Christmas themed. So, like, just happened to be it's a part of many short stories, and they picked me for this one, so it just happens to be Christmas themed.
So my question is, do you get to read it before you record it, or do you just get like a blurb about what the book is about?
So for the two full like novels that I'm working on, they are both available to be read on, like, they're on Kindle Unlimited right now, and they are like physical books you can read. So I could read those if I needed to, but for the most part, I get a blurb, and then you get like a script. Some people will give you a whole chapter to read. Some will give you, they just want to hear you say like 2 paragraphs or something. For the splatterpunk one, they did send me the full story to read. And then for like that one I didn't audition for, they actually listened to some of my samples that I had.
That's so cool.
And reached out to me and said they really liked what I was doing. And I love that because the sample they listened to was one of my like erotic ones. So like it wasn't even like a scripted chapter. They were like, oh no, this is hot and we want you. Thank you so much. Oh my God. we cannot wait for this. So it was really nice. I was like, wow, great. Because I
That's
have
so validating. Yeah.
I have a lot of like imposter syndrome. So I definitely am just like, this is trash. It sounds terrible and like, ew. And so it was really nice. I read that today, actually, before I left for book club. I was really excited. I was like, okay, thanks.
That's so awesome. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations, first of all.
Yes, that is so cool. And the fact that someone has sought you out is not surprising, but is also so exciting for you to have moving forward.
So when you say erotica, is it like, are you doing graphic audios? Or are you doing audio books where you're specifically like reading the narration specifically, or is it like a graphic audio where you're like acting things out? And
Okay, so for the projects I have, they are just written stories that I'm reading. I don't know if either of you know the app Quinn. There's a couple that are similar to it. Those are straight up like audio porn, for lack of a better term. I enjoy doing those. I do those audios myself as like a side thing. I would love to work for Quinn. I did submit an audition for them, but it was before I had really good like audio quality. So I was like, they don't want this. So I do both. I enjoy doing both. And but right now, I guess what's paying the bills is the more like just straight like written novels, if you will.
Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. I can't wait to see where that takes you. Like you've already had such success with it. That's really cool. I can't wait to see where it goes.
I think anybody who takes on a new skill as a grown-up should be very proud of themselves, because trying something new as a grown-up is very scary. So I hope you're very proud of yourself, because it's a very cool, awesome thing.
Absolutely. I have been the last couple of years between starting the silent book club and trying to make new friends and get out there as an adult. It's all very, very scary and can be overwhelming. But I don't know. I wanted to do this. I've always wanted to. I hate saying like I've always wanted to be famous, or I always wanted to be a content creator, because I think that comes with a lot of other layers. But I've always wanted to do something, and being able to do something like this where I'm kind of also doing it in secret, in a sense, is also really empowering.
Yeah, and you have this like tangible evidence of your bravery and your like putting yourself out there while you can still protect your peace and like keep yourself separate. It's like a professional versus personal, but you can also like still be openly share it and be very proud of this work. And then you're like, and I can also still kind of keep some of my identity. It's very Hannah Montana.
Very Hannah Montana indeed.
Moving into the episode, the theme that we pulled was fear.
So I don't know what my biggest fear is. I'll be honest. I think I have a lot of irrational fears.
Yeah.
I have a lot of fears that I know are goofy and silly. I think about my animals. They really are my kids. They're my whole life. I would do anything for them, and the thought of them being sick freaks me out. But if I go really deep, this is my husband and I both have this fear. This is so irrational, but just hear me out. We both have family history of mental illness, and we both have this so silly, irrational fear that we're going to wake up one day and one of us isn't going to be there, like we never existed.
Is that like the lamp theory that suddenly you like realize you've like been in a simulation the whole time?
Sort of, I think so, yes. But also like a schizophrenia kind of like fear of like, this person never existed. Like, I'm not kidding you. If we lose each other in the store, my husband is in a panic. He's like, you were never here. She was never here. She never existed. I don't know where she is. So there is this like little bit in my head of like, is this also because I think some things are just too good to be true? Like, I don't deserve to have the love that I have. Is that also part of it? Probably. Do I think that one day like everything's just going to fall apart because I don't deserve to have something like this? I think that's kind of like where my fears in general stem from, of like this fear of abandonment and like fear of like I'm actually not a good person and I don't deserve the things that I have. So I'm going to wake up and it's all going to be a dream.
Yeah. That's like, almost everything is rooted in our fear of being alone. Like as people, we weren't meant to do things alone. Like if we were, we wouldn't be here today. Cause like early from the first humans, like they needed each other to move forward and do things. And like that whole, it takes a village thing. Like I think my biggest fears before motherhood just look so silly to like what they are now. And I had reached such a place of acceptance before motherhood. I was like, you know what? If I croak, I croak. Like if something gets me, it gets me. Like now my biggest fear is something happening to my son, or like my child not being able to reach me, or me not being around for my child. I think that's a very common fear, that especially with people like that, we're going to wake up one day and realize in different words, right? Like it's the same fear that like I'm not good enough for what I have, or like I'm not, and that same fear is rooted in, you know, my fear with my son. It's like I'm not good enough to protect him. So that's definitely, if we want to ruin people's lives.
We want to get really
I'm just
deep.
kidding. Spiders.
Heights. I don't like those. No way. My biggest fear ever. So I'm glad that you asked this because I can kind of give you a 2-part answer. I have very bad vision. I'm almost legally blind. And I grew up in a household where there were arguments with my parents at nighttime. And I would wake up disoriented and I would not be able to see without my glasses. So I, as an adult now, living with children, I have this very irrational fear that someone will break in and that I will wake up in the middle of the night and I won't be able to find the children in time because I can't find my glasses. It's been like a recurrent nightmare I've had. It's something that really scares me. And so when I was sitting down and like thinking of stuff for this episode, like what's my biggest fear? Like is someone taking them and I can't save them because I can't see. And I was kind of like just looking, and I think that a lot of our fears like that can come from something that happened when you were like a child. And a lot of those kinds of like, I don't want to use the term phobia, I don't think I have a phobia, but like a phobia or a fear like that can stem from something when you're small. I have learned like, okay, the doors in the house are all locked and there's only a couple people in the house that have a key, so no one's going to come in. And also my ears, they don't work according to the ENT, not certain tones. But my ears work.
If the intruder breaks in at decibel 7.
Decibel 7, the kids are toast. But I had to kind of reframe within that first 6 months of, okay, let's break down why this is not like the most rational thing to be worried about. But I still have to work on that every day. Like my armpits are sweating right now, even like talking about it. And in reading this book, just like kind of fear in general, where it comes from, and ultimately like why are people attracted to it, like whether it's attention or thrill seeking things or like wanting to go to a haunted house. Like my big question was, what draws people to that, or like wanting to be scared? And that was a question I had for you because I know how many horror books you read, so I wasn't sure if you could tell us what kind of draws you to being scared or kind of taking in the content.
Yeah, no, I love horror. I love all things horror movies, horror books. I do love a good haunted house, especially during spooky season. I think for me there is a bit of like adrenaline junkie to it, like that getting fear and being a little amped up. But you know, I'm sure there's something really deep that my therapist could probably pull out from that. But I've just always liked having that little bit of fear. I also kind of like the gross out factor. And again, not sure, probably something real deep rooted. But I think for a lot of people, it's like you can get that fear in the context of like a controlled environment. You know, in a haunted house, you know it's not real, but it kind of feels real. And same thing when you're reading a book, like you know that it's not real, but you can experience that fear in kind of a safe space. That makes sense.
We were talking about that with dark romance, actually, kind of like that same, you're in a controlled environment, you know that typically it's going to be a happy ending, like, you know, it's going to be okay, it's not real. And that's like, I really like reading dark romance, but probably like along the same lines, there's probably something really deep rooted and traumatic there. I can understand the adrenaline rush so much, and I can understand what draws people to it. For me, I like have this fear of the unknown, which is like recently with an OCD diagnosis, I'm like, oh, but like fear and everything like that, and fear of all things horror is like, if I know how it's going to end, I can read it. So like for The Silent Patient, I like read the ending and then I could read the book. Like then I enjoy the horror and I enjoy the whatever, like the thriller. I can read it if I know what the outcome is. I have to know who makes it and who doesn't, and how things end, and then I can enjoy it.
Well, that's so cool to know, Cecilia, because I always knew that you spoiled, like you look at the spoilers, you read the ending first, and I don't think I ever asked you why.
Yeah, it's like not quirky, it's mental illness.
Well, it's funny because when it comes to horror, I don't think that like I need to know the ending, but I could pluck a book off the shelf and read it cover to cover, and it could be like a scary book and it wouldn't bother me, but I cannot watch it. I have no, like, I don't want to go see a scary movie. I don't want to watch The Red Wedding and Game of Thrones. Like, that is too much for me. And I think maybe because we just have special effects now that are so great and good that it looks so real. But when I read it and hallucinate it in my head, I'm like, oh, that's fine. It's all make believe. But I can't physically actually watch it projected. That's where I get too scared.
I don't know. That's very strange to me to hear, just in general, because I want every type of content that you can give me that's horror, and I'll watch it. Like, I have watched some really, really crazy horror movies in my time, and I sleep just fine. I sleep like a little baby, and I don't have any problems. But I don't know. I think about. I know there are like I said, I'm doing this like erotica splatterpunk, which has a lot of body horror in it. And I've heard authors of these types of books say for them it's therapeutic to like write that kind of stuff out. Maybe they've been through something very traumatic. Maybe they've experienced some of these things that in some dark romances are considered like kinks, but to them they're like, oh no, I experienced that and that was not enjoyable. For them, it's therapeutic for them to put it on a page. So I think maybe there's something in my brain that experiencing these things in a safe environment is therapeutic and helps me somehow.
And it also just might be what you like. So I think too, some people, maybe our brains, when they're forming, they just decide what they are going to want to like, and that's what you like.
Yeah, I think there definitely is. Sometimes I just watch it and I just like it. My husband is somebody who does not like horror movies. He does not like being scared. He doesn't do the haunted houses with me. That's just not his thing. He has, like claustrophobia and things like that. So he's like, I'm not interested in any of that. And I'm like, I need more. I'm like shaking and I need it. And like, I can't live like without it.
And two, when I was thinking about like, why do we want to get scared and like getting physiological, we have literally like this little teeny tiny almond sized thing in our brain called the amygdala, and that is basically what processes your fight or flight response. I just think the brain is so vast and in depth, and it's literally so scary to even talk about, but it'll help you form emotions and like learn a lesson from that. So it's interesting because I think about, okay, we learned how to do fight or flight to stay alive. Like the first humans to ever be here had to go, okay, I've got to run away from the saber-toothed tiger or it's going to eat me. And now our fight or flight is we have media or literature that we can consume where we know we're going to be safe. So we don't have to like have the flight to get away from it. And now we're consuming it more.
I think my amygdala is actually just like, you don't need horror because you can have the same experience in the middle of a grocery store when I give you a panic attack and convince you that you're being chased by a lion. Like that, then those are where my cortisol levels goes, and I'm just like in the cereal aisle. So my body's like, you don't actually have to watch horror content because you can't handle the cereal aisle. Like your amygdala, it just like glitches.
Yeah. Well, then I thought maybe where we were going with that was, are we strengthening it in some way? But no, I don't think we are, because I don't think that if I found myself in one of those situations I'd be running, I think I would freeze. I would just be deer in headlights.
Yeah.
As much as the content that I consume, if I was like kidnapped by a serial killer, let's talk about like Terrifier, like Art the Clown. That's it. That's what I'm doing. Like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm toast.
But one of the things that I would then ask you is, in what way would you try to manage your fears?
So, number one, I will tell you it's therapy. I will
Facts.
be so for real. I've gone through different therapists, and I found the therapist I see now about a year ago. And when I sat down with her, I said, I quite literally need you to hold my hand, and I need help. Like, talking is great, but I'm not getting anywhere. So
I need direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she worked really well with me and still does. And sometimes more recently, there is just some talking and trying to figure out what the next steps are. But in the very beginning, it was like, she was sending me articles after we had our session. She was sending me worksheets, things like that, giving me like homework. And I have, like I said, years and years of therapy. And I have made more strides in the last year with this therapist than my entire life. So that's number one, is finding a therapist that works for you and with you and is doing what you need them to do. But I will tell you that my biggest thing is, like, I just said I wanted to do it and I'm doing it. And that's terrifying. And I know a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, I've tried that. It doesn't work. I just did it and I didn't let myself stop. Even like my husband sometimes thinks all this book stuff is so silly, and like he's like, you're just reading porn on a page. Let's be real. And I'm like, shut up, okay? It makes me happy. But like he pushes me. Like the first book club, I was so nervous and I was so scared. And I was like, I don't think anyone's going to show up besides Alex. It's going to be the two of us in this giant room and no one's going to care. And my husband's like, even if it is, you have to do it because you said you were going to do it. So just, keep moving forward. And that is the only way that I've figured out how to just push through and get over that fear of just saying like, yeah, it is scary. Yeah, I do have butterflies. Yeah, I do kind of feel nauseous, but if I don't do it, I'm going to feel more regret and more like I missed something than if I pushed myself to just keep going.
I love what you said about therapy because, like, I've said on a previous episode, but I was in therapy for a few years or several months at one, in and out of therapy for years, but several months at one point. And one therapist, I was like, I'm not changing. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are we doing here? Like, I just come here and I talk and blah, blah. And he's like, well, you haven't taken a single suggestion. And I was like, because you can't just go and dump. And then like I love that you advocated for yourself too. And you knew what you needed because some clients need that direction. Some clients just need someone to listen and then validate that's why you have to just shop around until you find a therapist that's right for you. But if you can go in there advocating for your needs as a client, your therapist, it's only going to help them help you because then they can do things like give you homework or they can, and like, being honest in the moment about what you're feeling like is a scary thing, but it's so beneficial for your therapist. Like she was my current therapist was like validating my emotions after I would say something. And I was like, I have to be honest. It feels so uncomfortable when you do that. Like, I really don't like it. And then we like got somewhere really valuable in the session because I was like, well, I don't want to hurt her feelings because it's not about her and da da da. But if I had like kept doing that dance and held like my fear of hurting her feelings, it would have not gotten me the session that I got. And like she and I were able to really develop a closeness on me just being like, I really don't like that. Like when you validate my feelings, and I want to because I can tell you're being genuine and I want to be benefiting, but I feel so uncomfortable. And she was like, oh, let's explore that. And then it led to something. So it's like, but if I had just stayed afraid and not said anything, even in those little moments where you feel fear, it's like you can push yourself in any moment to like get something out of it or like help someone or help someone help you or like.
The two main things that I've learned with therapy and personal growth and healing is two things. Is one is that you have to want to be better. You have to want to change. You have to be able to say like, this is something that I'm doing that I don't like and I need to fix it. And that want is huge. And then like you said, being so honest and so real with your therapist, that's quite literally you're paying them. You are giving them money out of your pocket. And you are supposed to be getting something from that service, if you will. And yeah, you cannot be afraid to just say things like I said, I've had other therapists. This is the first time that I've just been so like honest and real with a therapist of like, I've told a therapist things I would have thought I would never tell another human being.
Like I was taking that to the grave.
Yeah. But I was like, you know what? I am not going to get anything out of this if I keep holding this thing tight. Like I literally, something was like, I was still stalking my ex on social media. I've never told a therapist that. I never told anyone that. Wouldn't have. I would have taken that to the grave. And I sat down with her like months ago and I was like, this is a thing that I'm doing that's really gross and I don't like it and I need it to be fixed. And that was something that we worked on. I mean, as simple as kind of goofy as that is, that's something that was causing me continued hurt and pain that like, what am I doing? And so, for me to say like, oh, I'm too embarrassed that I'm doing that. Like, that's embarrassing to me. Why would I tell someone that? Like, you have to, or you're never going to address those things.
Yeah. And you like get to the bottom of why you do what you do when you do that stuff, because I don't know, right? Like if I'm stalking my ex on social media or if I'm reading the end of a book before I read the beginning of a book, like whatever I'm doing that I don't want to admit to doing, if I can sit there and admit to doing it, your therapist's job as a professional is to like help you figure out why you're doing it. So it doesn't matter that I haven't figured it out yet, or like I haven't gotten to the bottom of it. I can still talk about it. And like I had no idea that I like with the feelings thing, why it was making me uncomfortable, but now I do. And there's so much freedom in, like, now you can be on a podcast and be like, I was stalking my ex on social media, because the relief and the freedom that you get from the clarity of finding out why you're doing what you're doing and like why you're repeating a cycle or why you're taking an action, then you're like, it doesn't trap you anymore. It's not an embarrassing thing because you got to the root of it. Like, and now I know myself better. I feel like more comfortable in my own skin because I've gotten to the bottom of why I'm doing something. And I have this deeper insight about myself now, and that isn't embarrassing.
I feel like sometimes as humans, we've just been conditioned to try and avoid discomfort in any way. So when you have to sit in something that's uncomfortable, especially when it comes to like your personal self or like something that you've been doing, sitting in that discomfort and then going, okay, we know that it's something, I know that it's something within me and I have to sit with it. And not only do I have to like, now I have to confront that and try to, with therapy, counseling, if I read a self-help book or let's do an audiobook, trying to kind of push through that confrontation, I think is a really scary thing to do. And I think there's probably plenty of people that get in that situation and go, I can't do this. I've been there before. I've tried and gone, this, I can't do this. And maybe if it's something that comes back in time, but you definitely have to be willing to do the work, because it's frightening to sit in something I need to work on area and then actually take steps to change that, because at that point sometimes you're used to a routine, and changing your routine can be even more frustrating on top of the emotional stuff that you're dealing with too.
But yeah, if I think about something like not silly goofy, but like something silly goofy that I'm afraid of, I fell down a rabbit hole on TikTok of submechanophobia.
What is that?
So like giant things underwater.
Okay. Yep.
So like specifically like statues and mechanics underwater. So like a big theme is like the Jaws ride at Universal, but seeing it either with the water drained, that makes my stomach sick, or like just the thought of what's happening under the water that you can't see.
No, I'm not touching the bottom of the ocean at all. I'm gonna float. But what you just said made me think about, and psychology people forgive me because I don't remember the name, but there was someone, I believe the name is like Rockman, and they had a thing about, I remember learning about how you develop the fear. So like you have this fear that you found online because you're not scuba diving, you're not seeing any of this stuff, and there's like this guy grouped it into 3 different ways that we learn to be, or we inherit the fear. So it's the direct conditioning, whereas like Christine went down, she saw
is a scuba diver.
She's a scuba diver, she saw it, she scared her. The other one is like Christine hears me talk about, I went down, I was traumatized by this, she saw it, now she's scared. And then I think the third one is very similar, or like you witnessed me go through it. And then the third one is the same thing, which is like someone's talking about being afraid of this and now you're afraid of it. So that's what made me think of it as I'm like, you're never going to experience, I mean, more than maybe you won't, I don't think that you're going to be scuba diving unless you want to, like, please do that if that's your dream. I am just I get like tickled at the amount of fears that we have, because not like we have our teehee funny honey, like haha stuff. Sometimes I have to take a step back to be like, okay, like this is possible, but is it, what's the likelihood of it actually happening? That's been when I was thinking about fears the other night, I said, okay, there are things that I'm afraid of. For me, confronting them, and I think is a way of like, I have to reframe the possibility of such a thing happening. But even though I know that the possibility is low, I'm still scared sometimes.
Well, and like I have to, a part of I'm mentally ill, as everybody on this podcast and any stranger that looks kind of nice knows. Like I just tell everyone, but that's like a trauma response, is that I worry and I ruminate and I cycle through these fears and I worry about all the what ifs. And 1, I rob myself of the moment that I'm in fully. But 2, you could convince me to be scared of absolutely anything. So like that water bottle, you could tell me something scary about it, I would believe you, and I'd be terrified of water bottles for the rest of my life. So like it's not good energy for me to like, just cycle over the things I'm afraid of, because it could just be anything. But also it's a self-protective thing that I think I'm protecting myself by like arming myself with all this information, and really I'm just stressing myself out. I'm just not I'm not very responsible with that information. I don't do responsible things with it. I ruminate on it.
And I wonder with like the information of knowing like translating that into the information of knowing that we're scared, like, who was the first person to go, let's exploit it? Like, imagine being the guy that pitched Fear Factor. And like the first chunk of Fear Factor is like, you know, the first task is like do some crazy physical thing. And then the next guy was like, yeah, and then make him eat a cow tongue.
I understand chasing that adrenaline high and like being entertained by what will they do next? Like, what's the next thing?
I think also, though, something like Fear Factor feeds into, we'll circle back to musicals for a second. If you've ever heard of Avenue Q, not very PC, but they have a song called Schadenfreude, which is a German word for having enjoyment in the downfall of others, or like seeing somebody do something that, you know, like, I don't want to be in their shoes. Something like Fear Factor, and even some horror movies, you're like, yeah, I want to see someone else go through that, but I don't want to. And we get that little bit of like enjoyment of seeing somebody go through something that we ourselves would not want to experience. I don't want to eat a cow tongue, do you? Well, cow tongue tacos are not bad, but however,
But they're not giving it to you in a taco form.
Correct.
They're like, here's the tongue.
Here's the whole tongue. Right.
I think it's a natural arc. I mean, you know, like you see someone get pranked or spooked, or somebody comes around the corner and goes boo, and then like we're all laughing. You know, it's just different levels of that. So it's like wherever, but it like somebody else finds it entertaining. Like anytime that I have a visceral reaction to something that I'm noticing that everybody else is taking enjoyment in, I'm like, okay, it's me. like I'm something about horror, and like I get wanting to elicit that response in yourself and like chase it. Like it's fun, it's a high, it's a rush.
Maybe I just haven't ever had the adrenaline rush. Maybe I've never had that kind of high. So I don't know what it's like to be that actually afraid.
Well, I mean, like I don't want to be afraid. I just mean like I know that I really like things and I chase certain feelings. So like I chase the feeling of like being really joyful. I chase a laugh that like hurts my stomach. Like I think it's just like copy paste, you know, someone else just likes that response elicited, and I can totally understand that. It doesn't mean that like I don't want that response elicited in me, but because for me it's uncomfortable, but for somebody else they enjoy it, you know.
There's also another thing that you get into with the adrenaline rush. You want to, like you'd say, you want to consume more and more and more and more because you're chasing that high. So do we also get to a point where, yeah, we started off with like Nosferatu was like one of the first horror movies way back in black and white, to like now we have straight up cannibalism on, you know, film kind of situation. Or I think about like dark romance. A lot of people say like Haunting Adeline is like a dip in the water, and for some people like that, they read that and they're like, I could never read another dark romance in my life. And like I've read some really crazy things since then. So like, what do we get to a point where maybe we're chasing that too much? I don't know.
That's a great question. Like at some point does it become, well, I was going to say at some point does it become an unhealthy like fixation, but I think that can happen with anything. And you're right, like you said earlier, now our amygdalas don't work. Well, do you guys have any final thoughts on biggest fears, your biggest fear in general, fear specifically?
I'm feared out. I'm afraid to talk about fear any further.
Yeah, because I'll think about it all night. You tell me one thing and I'll go, I could be concerned about that. And I'll
like, you know what? I'm not concerned enough about that. You're right.
I actually hadn't thought about that one, but I'm going to start to think about that one often. Well, I guess at this point we can probably move into our book portion if you'd like.
Let's do it.
Shall we?
Phantasma. Moving into our book portion. So the book that we read for this episode was Phantasma by Kaylie Smith. Again, it's the Wicked Games theory or Wicked Games series. Before we really dive in, just so you know, we are starting the book portion and now the spoilers begin. So anything, listen further at your own risk if you haven't listened and you don't want things spoiled, because I have ADHD, so I'll spoil them out of order. Like you get, it's not like So Phantasma, we meet Ophelia Marie with OCD, which I thought was insane, because not to make everything about me, but my name's Cecilia Marie and I have OCD. Initially, I guess we meet her and her sister Genevieve, and they find their mother dead. That's like how the book starts, and there's some sort of transferring of magic. Like you can tell kind of when you're starting the book, there's some sort of transferring of magic going on. You don't have all the full pieces yet, but I'm like putting things together. I'm like, okay, she's like a witch of some sort. That's what I'm thinking. And she's got to do a blood ritual to get her mom's blood so that the magic can pass through her. We don't know yet why or how her mom died. There's no real signs of a struggle or signs of a scene. She just finds her mom, and then her younger sister Genevieve is there as well, but Ophelia is the one that needs to take on the magic for the family legacy.
I think in that very first section of the book, it's almost clear that she's doing it almost out of jerk reaction. Like, she knows that she's been training for this. She knew that the day that her mother died, whether natural causes or otherwise, that she had to do this. Because I think, and I could be wrong, I think there is something where she says either in that same chapter or maybe a little later that, like, it's almost a time frame. Like, she wants us running out of time. Like, there's only so much time between when her mother is deceased to, like, whatever, that she has to get this ritual done. So she's like up against the clock when she finds her mom. She doesn't know how long she'd been there when they found her. So it's almost like she knew that this was going to happen someday, maybe just didn't realize it was going to be this soon.
You know, we find more about her mom's practice and like what her mom's been doing in bits and pieces. But one of the things that they're like gossiping, her and her sister are like giggling in bed or like gossiping, that people come in and are like, can you resurrect my loved one? Can you tell my dad I love him? Can you do this? And this guy is like, can you resurrect my girlfriend so she can tell the police I didn't do it? And I made the note, may this type of love never find me. Because
that guy did it.
What? For like what reason? That's not because you love me so much, but
If you brought me back from the dead to try to prove your innocence, I am squealing like a pig. He absolutely did whatever it is, even if you didn't do it. Absolutely not. You're gonna bring me back for that? Absolutely not. My eternal rest. You're gonna bring me back from that?
The rest of all rest?
Insane.
It's nuts when we eventually find out what, like, how her mom died. That was
that I did. Hey guys, breaking news. I didn't see it coming.
I did not see the mom's passing coming that way. That was crazy. I thought honestly she had like pissed off a ghost or something. Like, once you find out that her mom is a necromancer and you like are taken through that journey, I'm like, oh, she just like pissed somebody off in the afterworld, like eventually, and that was what I chalked it up to. The whole Gabriel plot twist was insane. But see, that's what I mean about ADHD. Like, what? That's at the end of the book.
It's fine. We're here and we're there. It's funny because the summary of the book says that their mom was brutally murdered, and spoiler alert, she like wasn't brutally murdered. So I don't know.
She was just regular murdered.
Yeah, like I don't know if I agree with that, but you know, jumping around a little bit, shortly thereafter, she learns that the estate that they live on, they are going to lose their home. Genevieve was aware of that. Like, she found out about the money troubles that their mother was having. And Ophelia is very overwhelmed by this because she didn't know about it and was kind of kept in the dark.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, so one, on the brutally murdered point, we were like joking around in the car. And then now that I think about it, I'm like, actually, not to like change my mind. One thing about me, I will never stand on business. I will change my mind all the time. But I'm like, I guess like actually she kind of was, because once you find out about Phantasma and the devils and the, like, technically her mom was brutally murdered. Like,
oh my gosh, we just didn't see it. You're right.
We just don't like know that, because we, in our minds, that means that we have to see a scene, we have to see whatever. But her mom was like, her life was taken brutally, unnecessarily, murder, because these like of this otherworldly magic at play, and because her dad made a deal with the devil, basically. Also, that's like the first showing of, I think, what we come to understand as like Ophelia's OCD and how that's like impacted her family dynamic, because they basically assumed that she was too fragile, that she couldn't handle knowing that, because she like spirals and she has the shadow voice and she does these rituals for compulsions. But basically they're like, we can't worry her with this because this is like one of her fears coming to life. Like, don't knock on something 3 times, and if you don't do this, your family will lose everything. Like, it's kind of one of, so like, and with them being familiar with her OCD, which is presented as the shadow voice, it's like we already get intel into how her family operates, and it's really to protect her from information that she's not going to do healthy things with.
Right. You know, she immediately kind of, like you said, she spirals, but she goes into trying to problem solve, which is, how do I go ahead and get the money and figure this out and get down to the bottom of this? And Ultimately, Genevieve disappears. Genevieve leaves.
Yeah, well, I think she's like in denial. She's like, because the guys are like, "Hey, we're gonna take your house," and she's like, "Actually, you're not, losers. Like, I'm out of. Can't take the house if I'm not at the bank." Like, and she like,
And
leaves.
she
So I don't even know.
gets it out of there.
She doesn't even have a plan. She's just like, middle finger. No, you're not taking my house.
I also wonder if there's a part of Genevieve who she knew that she was not going to take the magic. I think she knew that that wasn't her role. So was she trying to take another responsibility of some sort, which was trying to keep the mom from worrying about things or keep Ophelia from worrying about the house and things like that. I think we talked a little bit in the chat about how we thought Genevieve was the older sister just because of the way that she acts sometimes, but she is the younger sister. And I think that she had to take the role as the older sister because Ophelia, I think her whole life was just raised to know that she was going to be the next necromancer in the family. So that plus the shadow voice, she really couldn't focus on anything else or had a very hard time focusing on being the older, more responsible sister.
And even Genevieve is like, I'll handle something for once, though. So it's really hard to tell their dynamic growing up because Genevieve is like this socialite party girl that
Right.
her mom doesn't really care about her, and so she's out and doing whatever. But honestly, she's like the voice of reason a lot, which is where you get it confused because it's like it sounds like Ophelia is taking on all this responsibility and like really chasing after their mom's validation and everything, whereas Genevieve is like running around free. But she
Right.
has a lot of quotes where I was like, this girl gets it. Like she like is with it. She knows what she's doing. Like I'm thinking that she made the decision to go into Phantasma on like a dummy whim, but I think she was probably more sound of mind than Ophelia, who I think
Right.
was just like driven by guilt. I don't want this to be my fault. Whereas Genevieve had been like planning this for years,
Right.
had been following Phantasma, had really good control of her powers. So I think she like seems like the older sister in that way because she's like actually more responsible.
Right.
Whereas Ophelia is like still chasing her mom's validation and just
Right.
carrying something out to not disappoint her family legacy. And then she's like, I'm just going to go into Phantasma on a whim. Whereas like Genevieve probably has been training for it from what we know.
Which you need to do, turns out, because being in any level of Phantasma is like the ultimate physical. You need to be in peak physical condition to participate in Phantasma.
Yeah, no gym days skipped.
No gym day skip, no legs, arms, fingers, toes, everything needs to be in great shape. And so Ophelia, like she just goes. She's like, she reads Genevieve's diary and Genevieve's not there, but I'm like, whoa, still an invasion of privacy.
Which like genuinely shocking because you have sisters and you haven't already read her diary. Like I'm obviously this story is fake.
Cecilia's like, I would have been reading that diary contemporaneously
devour
every
that
night.
diary.
So Ophelia goes and she enters Phantasma, which is like this spooky haunted house, and there are 9 levels, and ultimately like the big prize is that the devils will grant you a wish. And she enters Phantasma with really the hope of finding Genevieve,
Which is crazy because she's really focused on her sister until
Which relatable. Until Danny Phantom
Phantom shows up. Then we're like, wait a minute, we've got some ulterior motives here.
No, one of my notes was actually like during one of their intimate scenes, I literally wrote, listen, I love a sex scene, but they only have that book for 24 hours. Like they were like doing it. And I'm like, this is great. Love the spice. But also you only have they at this point had one of the other devils had given them the log.
There's a
books.
bargain.
Like,
yeah.
This is like a very important thing that you only have 24
Research
hours to be
needs
going.
to be done. Yes.
Yeah. Like you need to be looking through this. And really she's like getting her cheeks clapped. And I'm like, Ophelia.
Getting that book made her very horny. She was like, we got it. This is it. This is the answers. But first, this.
I was like, we have some things to do. Also, I don't even think she had slept with him before. So I'm like, you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. This
This could be for naught. This could be for, I mean,
something that I thought was like personally unnecessary about the house in general. I know it's a house of horrors, but like we're already going through every single night as a new trial. That's also terrifying. Do we need the nightly terrors also that are like going on just haphazardly? Also, I mean, that's the
that could
gist.
kill you too.
Right. But like you're just in bed sleeping and this is how in my brain how I imagined it was like I'm in bed, I'm sleeping, and like there are just people screaming out in the hallway. There are monsters out there, and then sometimes also maybe the ceiling's bleeding. I'm not really sure, but like I was just like, this is. I get it. I think you want me on edge at all times, but like, can I get a second to sleep?
Literally, because also now I'm doing all of these trials sleep deprived, so that's obnoxious. But I think that I was so invested in the Blackwell relationship because I wasn't really invested in the sister relationship. It took a lot of convincing for me to like really we didn't spend enough time with them. I don't know what it was, but I was like, and when we did spend time with them, they were bickering.
I agree with you that although I think the main plot, well, there's a couple different plots, I think, was that she was trying to find her sister because I think she just didn't want her sister to suffer or whatever. I didn't feel like we got enough in the beginning to like give me any like, I'm so sorry, Genevieve. You're giving me nothing, girl, and I don't care. So that for me felt very like weak for a plot point.
Yeah.
But I was so there for Blackwell.
And I thought she was like such a bimbo. And then we meet Genevieve later, and I'm like, wait, you're kind of cool.
Well, yeah. And literally, as I was reading, I forgot she's even trying to like find Genevieve because she's so hooked on helping Blackwell. Like you're so invested in like, okay, where's the key and the heart and the this and that for Blackwell? Then I'm like, forget about Genevieve. Genevieve, who? We haven't even talked about her or brought her up.
Yeah, and she's making choices like hooking up instead of looking through the book to see if her sister is there, like that she only has for 24 hours. And she's like, actually, I'm gonna have mind-blowing sex with this phantom I met 2 days ago. Yeah. My sister can wait.
So for some of my notes and stuff, I did go through some reviews that I found on like Reddit that like resonated with how I felt. And so there was one that made a note here that said something like they just spent half the book doing it, and then randomly, I forget which level they hit finally, where all the different rounds of people, or all the different sections of people can come together finally.
7, yeah, level 7.
And Genevieve knocks on the door and she opens it and she's just like, oh, right. You again. Like that was, I definitely felt that was so underwhelming. I was like, why aren't you like screaming, yelling, jumping up and down, excited? Here's your sister, the girl you were looking for. You didn't even, up until this point, you believed she was here, but you didn't actually know she was. And she shows up and you're just like, you've kind of interrupted something.
Which like, okay, but fair, but I made this note. I was like, some of this stuff is, the spice is repetitive because I'm like, they keep getting interrupted and it's like annoying. So by the time their sister interrupted them, I was like, the way I would be like, Genevieve, hold on.
I'm gonna finish something here. I'm up to something. I'm doing something.
Like Jasper interrupted them, then they got interrupted by like the dinner bells or something, and then now it's like I'm like, just let them finish.
You wait this. You forget that you're waiting for this whole reunion to check on Genevieve, and then Genevieve finally comes around and she's like, oh, you slut. Like it's like this joking banter that you like don't expect, and it was not nearly as emotional as I would have expected it to be, because at this point they're 7 levels in, they're near the end. I mean, people have died, people have forfeited because it's so scary, and then you're not even like crying or like, you don't have to cry, I get it, not everybody cries, but like it was very surface level to be like, oh, you're here, I'm glad you're alive, cool, and also leave now, go home because I've got this.
And even during that reunion, I think it's then she sees Blackwell and he makes some kind of weird innuendo-y joke or something, and like just the whole thing felt yucky and not like what really felt like I was being edged the whole time, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Yes, I'm saying.
Absolutely not. Give me absolutely nothing.
The fact that Genevieve had to find you is low-key embarrassing. Like, when she knocked her, I was like, this can't possibly be the reveal, because this is so embarrassing for Ophelia that she was having sex instead of looking for her sister as soon as she got to level 7, which, like, that's fine.
Right.
Just don't pose the relationship as something like that, because would I be having sex with hot Danny Phantom instead of looking for my sister?
Yes.
Absolutely. But like, you would know that. And she's already having like banter with her boyfriend, which I would be like, chill, find a ghost of your own.
And they were like, they had already met, right? At some point.
No, she had met Sinclair.
She met Sinclair. Okay. They did have banter right away, and I was like, that's kind of weird. I don't know if I like that. Like, I haven't even seen you. You found me. I'm mad at you for that, and now you're also gonna just like talk to my boyfriend.
First of all, you have bigger boobs than me, and you're gonna flirt with my boyfriend.
Yeah, like like you had so many kisses before you came here and I only ever kissed one guy and now I'm kissing this really hot guy and you're just gonna like make a joke? I don't.
He was buried in her. They were not kissing. The way also, like, if my sisters walked in on me, my sister wouldn't be like, what have I stumbled upon? Like, my sister would leave.
Like, no.
The thought of walking in on my sister and immediately being like, what are you two doing, gives me like hives, because I would just walk in and be so mortified.
I thought that the dynamic with Blackwell also was something that I don't know why it changed near the end, because as we know, there's this big twist with you can't fall in love when you're in Phantasma, and there's this whole story about why, and like you get this twist at the end where you find out that Blackwell, who we call Blackwell the whole time just to end the book and call him Salem, which was so bizarre to me.
Well, because he did that thing where he's like, have every immortal soul, or every soul that even knows my name, forget it. So then he had to be called Salem. But I wrote no next to him making that deal, because I thought she was going to forget him. I thought that was foreshadowing of her forgetting him when he was like, make sure everyone like when he made that deal out of spite. And then the author was making this whole thing about like the fact that we have to live with the consequences of our actions and the choices that we make. So when he said that, and then like Ophelia just happened to remember him, I was like, okay, thank God.
He's like kind of a jerk at first. She thinks to herself, oh, I never should have trusted you. But like she doesn't really like have that exchange with him about
No,
like,
she's like so immediately cool with it.
she's like, actually, it's okay that you're the Prince of Devils, and by the way, I love you. And he's like, what? And then that like brief moment of I was tricking you went away, and then he was like, oh, what? Okay, let's be together forever, but it's a deal, it's a bargain, you have to take, like, I didn't get that.
It was so anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. Like he's avoidant, and so he's like, actually, literally, I hate you, and I don't even care about you, and I've been a villain this whole time. And then she's like, that's crazy because I love you, and I was gonna use my one wish to free you. And he's like, and I love you. Like it just switches so fast.
As a girl that used to be like boy crazy, it didn't serve me well at all. When you talked about earlier how you said that, like, you know, Ophelia at the very end, she's like, I was going to use my wish to free you. You mean to tell me you were going to come all that way worried about your sister? You met this guy you saw for a couple of days, and then you weren't going to be like, I need the money for our estate. I wish I had the money for the estate. You're just going to free this guy?
But I thought that was relatable. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Hey man, that's what good D can do sometimes, you know what I'm saying? He was also very like kind of loving during though.
Yeah.
Because how do you have that twist at the very end? So there's a time where after he like kind of learns about her OCD and her like rituals and the shadow voice,
yeah,
and he tries to help her, so like he directs her, he realizes that she has to do everything in threes. So he directs her to breathe 3 times. And that's how he helps bring her back from it. There's things like that, and he does it a few different times. But you actually didn't care about me. I don't understand.
Me too. Like I swear, it feels like the author started writing this crazy villain arc for him, which I would have hated, by the way. I wrote in my thing, hate this plot twist. And then she like got up from her computer and like took a nap and came back and kind of forgot the arc she was going. So then she wrote the rest of it. And like, I'm glad that it's happy ending, that they're together. But I was like, that weird pocket of like a few paragraphs where he's like, gotcha, is so, I'm like, that just feels very misplaced.
It was, and you're right, because he does say like, this is your fear, but that's not what her primary fear was. It's on, I made a note of it on page 416. She said that her main fear, her biggest fear, is accidentally harming herself because of her shadow voice. And it turns out that once she gets far enough in the house, this is what happens to her, is that there's this manifestation of the shadow voice, and it comes out and it attacks her. And you later realize that this was all something that was like created by the house, and she's attacking herself. So I think a fear, like perhaps a fear because she loved Blackwell, was him like tricking her. But he was like, this was your biggest fear all along. And I was like, wait, no, it wasn't. We just learned like not that many pages ago that it was actually about the shadow voice, which you were like kind of cool about.
I think he meant like the biggest fear of like their outcome of their relationship.
Okay, fair.
But I thought that the OCD, that is something that I just really thought was great representation of like what that disease looks like from though even little pockets like the one you're talking about. Like OCD, there are so many fears that like even they say at the beginning when they're, you know, kind of going through your brain after you say you're going to enter Phantasma, then the magic goes into your brain to pull out your deepest fear. And the guy, I forget exactly what he said, but he was basically like, wow, there's like a lot to work with. You are so afraid of so many things. Phantasma is going to be awful for you. And like it took him a minute to find her deepest fear. So it's like, I think that was a further push of that representation, which was really cool.
Regarding her OCD, what I liked about the representation with OCD in the book is that Ophelia, like the happy ending doesn't happen, and that like in a way, or there's not a character arc with Ophelia where all of a sudden her OCD goes away. Like they're like, oh, she met Blackwell and now she's in love with him and he's great and amazing and now the shadow voice doesn't exist. I liked that there was kind of this, it felt like for me at least, there was kind of this arc where she, through the experience with Phantasma, learned how to, I don't know if manage is the right word, like manage the shadow voice, but knew that like she was capable of things herself, no matter what the shadow voice was trying to tell her. And I thought that that was a really poignant way of, you know, saying that this character has dealt with this the whole time. It's part of who she is. It's an integral part of who she is. And we're not going to just change that because she met a guy.
I like that the relationship quieted it a little bit for her though, because you can have like based on your partner's reactions, you can have partners that like say Blackwell came in and was like, oh my God, like stop, like no, you know, or like treat it like it's not that big of a deal. Obviously nothing's going to happen, or be like kind of eye roll about it. So I liked that he quieted it because he did the work to meet her needs, as opposed to, it wasn't like just the guy comes in and they're in love, so he quiets it. It's like
magic or something.
Yeah, it's like he did the work to understand her and to say, okay, these are the things I need to say to like help her calm down. These are the things I notice. She does things in threes. So like he did quiet it in a way and like help her with that. But I thought that was a powerful representation of how you can help your partners navigate things without it being detrimental to you, and in a healthy way, and that there are wrong ways for partners to handle things when it comes to mental illness.
So she says to the voice at some point, he will always come to me. We find each other every time, and you can't stand that because it means I'm no longer alone with you. And I think that was a really, really powerful way of them showing how Blackwell helped quell that voice when he was around, because that was the biggest thing. The voice was there when she was by herself and I think we all have that when our anxieties are the worst, when we are by ourselves in our own heads. And that's when her voice was the worst. And she did have that little bit, even though it was part of the bargain with him, there was that little bit of security of like, I'm going to call him and he's going to come no matter what. And I want him to be alone with this.
Yeah. At one point, she's like thinking about her sister, and basically the shadow voice is trying to convince her to hurt her sister. And I was impressed to see that take on OCD in the book, because that's kind of like the really unsexy version of OCD that people don't like, oh, you have that kind of OCD, like that people don't talk about. And I really just liked seeing it written out like that and her struggle with that, because it's a very real side of it, that sometimes your intrusive thoughts are really dark and they're things that you would never do. So you're confused by them. You're hurt. You're wondering if you're a bad person. Like kind of, we see her go through this whole thing. Like, am I a bad person? Is this actually a reflection of who I am? Blah, blah, blah. And she like reaches this arc where it's not, but in those moments, I mean, that was cool. Like to see she's like wanting to hurt her sister.
Right.
In the shadow voice is like, don't you want to hurt her? Like she kind of feeding all these things that she doesn't actually think. But when you have OCD and you're like thinking these things, you're like, why would I ever even pull that? You know, like that's like not who I am. And like you kind of cringe at your own thoughts. So seeing that on paper and seeing that this character was dealing with that too, I was like, dang.
I overall really like the representation of OCD in this book, just from, they describe it as a shadow voice. And like I said, we kind of discussed like what era does this take place? But
yeah, like where
are we? What time period are we in? But
why don't we have pants?
But I think this was a really great way of them describing a mental illness in a time where it wasn't something discussed. I mean, even up until like the 60s, even women went undiagnosed with things because they thought it was like, oh, you're just being a silly goose woman and you don't really know what you're talking about.
She's a witch.
Right.
I just thought everything that they did, and I also appreciated, like you said, like those very scary, kind of unsexy, like you see things in like TV and stuff of OCD where it's like, oh, I just have to touch this knob 3 times because something in me makes me do it, or like, oh, tiki, everything has to be super clean, and like I'm so organized, right? Whereas, you know, truly, most people that struggle with this, it's these very dark thoughts. We don't really truly understand where they come from. Sometimes it's underlying trauma and things like that. And to see her struggling with like real thoughts, like real fears, like not just doing this as a ritual. Like if I don't knock on this wall 3 times, I really truly think that like my sister's going to drop dead right now.
Yeah. And even I made another point in here that I like, that a lot of times you can even see her understand that it's not rational. Like she's like, the shadow voice tells her to do something, and she's like, if I knock on this wall 3 times, it will not affect that outcome at all. And she can like logically get there, and she still gives into the compulsion. And I think that was a great demonstration of how intense it can get. Like you can't, it's like you can rationalize it sometimes and you still have to do it. You know, for me, one of them is like checking the locks a million times on my doors at night. And like I will be laying in bed about to fall asleep, and as soon as that thought hits, it doesn't matter that I know I've checked. Like it's like I still have to get up and go to the door, and I like feel defeated because I'm like I've caved again, and but it's the only thing that'll quiet that thought. And seeing that on paper, I think it was just a great representation as well. Like she acknowledged a few times, I know that knocking on the wall 3 times is going to have no impact on the outcome. It's not going to save my sister. It's not going to, but she still had to do it. And then I like, not like in a way of like, I like that her mental illness is ruining her, but I like the reality of like, she still caved because that's realistic.
I had made a note too with the shadow voice. When I was reading it, I assumed, I probably shouldn't have, but I assumed it like wasn't gendered. Like you never knew what kind of tone of voice that you just knew that it was like a mean entity talking to her. But I always assumed it was like a male kind of figure. And then when it actually becomes like a physical being at the time that it haunts her, it doesn't even have a face. It's just like a black being with like a mouth. I knew that something might come to fruition with the shadow voice because it was so prominent as we were reading about it, but I didn't know what to expect the kind of like physical manifestation for it to be. And I thought that that was kind of it was different than what I expected.
And I wasn't expecting a physical manifestation ever, actually, which like imagine my surprise, but but I did assume it was like her, like, you know, just layering parts of her, because I mean, I hear my intrusive thoughts in my voice, and I think that adds to the fear that she reflects of like, is this really like me? Like, am I this dark?
That's really funny because in my mind, now I do think the shadow voice is described to be like dark or something or deep. I could be completely making that up. In my mind, it was her mother's voice. I don't know why.
Wow. Oh, that's really powerful, especially because like the origin of just that constant need to be tweaked and controlled, and like OCD can manifest that way. That's a cool connection. One of the things with mental illness in here that I thought was interesting is how she kind of learns throughout. Like, so first the shadow voice is louder and more aggressive once they're in Phantasma. It's not like, but it doesn't feel like it's behind a filter anymore. And it's kind of like, this is the real me. And her intrusive thoughts get worse. It's like, you can't handle the real me. And she makes a note that it sounds more sinister versus just a reminder on the outside. And then of course, when it just progresses later when she is seeing it manifest, that basically she's learning that her mental illness is like not something that's put in place to protect her. So like these rituals are not to protect her. It's like, this is actively working against you. Like it's trying to rob you of your peace. And like her coming to terms with that, I think can be applicable across like OCD, anxiety, struggling with sobriety, or staying, you know, an addiction. It's almost falsely presented as being there to protect you. Like if you do this, then it'll be okay. If you do, and really it's like that piece of your mental health is like, it's working against you.
It made me interested in the other characters because her haunt like was so deeply personal. And then I thought of, was it, I don't know who it was, if it was
the guy with the crows.
Yes. And he lost an eyeball, and then at one point like all of the food downstairs, I guess that was just a regular haunt, but like all the food downstairs like gets covered in maggots and stuff like that. So I kind of wished we had seen a little bit more of the other contestants and like what their fears were. Who did we have? We had Lucy.
She was also a paranormal being of some sort,
Right.
and I think she's gonna come back because she's Genevieve's friend. I think we'll probably revisit her because we didn't like learn what kind of paranormal being she was,
Right.
but that was a cool reveal that she was bleeding like a milky
Yeah,
color.
like the substance and whatnot. One of my favorite quotes was at one point they were talking about something else that someone feared that was like a group conversation, and I liked that the contestant Charlotte, she said, you can't always help what you fear, and I really liked that, and I found that to be very striking, like a poignant thing to say, because you can't, and what may be scary to me and could seem silly to you is a real valid thing, and everybody reacts to those sorts of things differently, and you have to have space for it.
The one fear with the serpent, but then it
they
ended
were
up like
saying
attacking her. I was like, that's cheap.
I had completely forgotten about the shadow voice manifestation because in my brain for the longest time I thought that was hers because how that played out, I was very confused.
Yeah.
Like, was that somebody's specific haunt?
Maybe
The
it was
name.
Bo, the guy that
You might be right.
got splattered, that was the crazy scene. I was like, actually, I don't really like this part.
Agreed. I remember reading that part and thinking, well, that got crazy out of nowhere.
Crazy out of nowhere. Like, it was like, that's like horrific and graphic. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
we're in this little house of horrors and sometimes we do this ghost. And then like all these people started getting splattered.
Oh yeah, it took a turn.
And you cannot tell me that Ophelia ever in her life had a soft heart, because I'm sorry, if somebody gets splat next to me and I'm like, it's still your turn, Lucy, you better go. Like, what in the like?
You're not wrong. However, I know we said like our reaction would be to freeze, but then also when you're in it and you just saw that happen, I don't want that to happen to me.
Yeah, I'm like disassociating.
So I bet
that.
you better, if it's your turn, you better move because I am not getting splat. Not today.
Yeah, You made the point that you don't think she could have killed Cade with her bare hands.
I did say that in the car. I was like, that level was crazy. I don't know how she was just going to kill a grown. If you asked me to fight a grown man with my bare hands, I'm not strangling him to death.
One with like rage, like he was like so angry. There's no
At
way
her.
he had like a personal vengeance for her. I just don't know. And I was like, do we not have laws in this time period? Because one, dresses everywhere is a wild choice, but also like, why are you telling everyone that you killed this guy? You can't just go around saying
there
that.
are no laws within the walls that did mean that rhyme of Phantasma. Like, how can there be? Everyone's dying.
Right.
You're probably sabotaging one another at some point.
And the way I still would have taken that to my grave, she literally busts out of the exit and is basically like, hey guys, you remember Cade? I killed him. Like, what?
I was excited to see what the next kind of task
Yeah.
was that they had to do, because they were scary in their own right. Like the first one kind of is a level of scary, right? Where they were in this maze.
That's
it's
crazy.
Like,
Sensory
yeah,
deprivation.
Ooh, no thanks. And then you move into the one with the lust and you don't know what's what. And it's just like this big giant like sex orgy around you. And
That one would have taken me out, because honestly, I would be like doing
bye. I'd be like getting fondled for sure.
something.
That entire chapter, that whole section, I was like, oh, I'm out. I would
be dead.
Done. Are you kidding me? I would. No way would I have been able to. What is she like? Recognize that he calls her something else, not angel, sweetheart. Me, I'm just like, call me whatever you want. Okay, we're getting down right now, and that's all that's gonna happen. And I do not care. My horny ass is dead after that.
Yeah, and also like, you've known for 2 days. Maybe he does call you sweetheart sometimes.
Right.
She's like, sweetheart, you've never called me that in the 7 hours I've known you.
That's so me coded. I'd be like, we have something special, and that's not what you normally sound like. So either you're mad at me or not the real you.
And either way, we are not having sex until we talk about it.
Yes, in circles for quite some time. He shows up and there's all this sexual tension. The real Blackwell. Again, I'm toast. 4 bell chimes. No way. I'm not getting out of there in time.
Yeah, he's like, we have to leave. And I'm like, actually, there's a bed right there, and you're here now.
And look at what's happening around us, pal. Like, we don't have to go anywhere.
And like, I can be quick. I'm looking at adult Danny Phantom. I can be quick.
I did like that finally. I will say I was excited for Ophelia to like be in her sexiness because, you know, she kind of says like I was never like everybody used to look at my sister. She's got these voluptuous curves, like she's the socialite. I was like, you know what? Go ahead, take some initiative. Go look for your stuff. And like immediately she's like, I want you to touch me. And they were really going for it. How could she know about like how to dirty talk? Ophelia, we've only known that you've ever been with one guy. And
Yeah,
like
she's never been on Reddit in her life.
no, and this guy's like grab the headboard and all this stuff and like
I was like, you copied that.
I know 100%. I was like, this is plagiarism. I'm reading it with my eyes. But I guess she's like finding herself in her sultry moment.
I'm so tired of like the young female main character that has like never had sex or like
Right.
only slept with one guy before Elliot and he didn't make me feel like this. I'm like, it as a slut. No. What is your spectrum? You know what I mean? Like, have you never orgasmed or have you just slept with one guy? Like, of course you've never had anybody make you feel this way. I don't know anybody who loses their virginity and has mind-blowing sex. So it's like Blackwell might be really mid in bed. She's like describing, I'm like, oh, he just found your G-spot. Like that, okay. Yeah.
And doesn't he forget everybody or something at the end of every Phantasma? So wouldn't he also forget everything that he's learned in his many years of love making, if you will? I mean,
And then he says, he's like, I was never like this with any of the other contestants. I don't know if I believe that. You mean to tell me you just come in here all sexy and your shirt's off and I'm in my skimpy little nothing slip and that you didn't get this far with anybody else?
Yeah, you're not taking your pants off with one hand and you've never slept with any other contestant. Like, get out of here. The one hand move, I made a note that it was super hot. He's like, yeah, I slept with the one devil girl, Rhea, a very long time ago. And I was like, a one-handed takeoff of your pants is not muscle memory. That was recent.
don't the other like devils or whatever also constantly make comments of him being like a playboy, basically?
Yeah, they're like, oh, Blackwell's got another pet. Blackwell's got another little kitten.
So how are you gonna look me right in my face and tell me I've never, you were the first one that I've gone that like you're lying and you're gaslighting.
Ophelia's OCD is like, you should kill your sister. And really her OCD should be like, you should question your boyfriend a
In depth.
little bit deeper.
100%. The first time I read the book, I'm like, this is so amazing. They're like really like, but now that I think about it, oh, he's kind of a bad guy.
I love him. I don't
Yeah.
think he's a bad guy, but I just think that Ophelia, not to be like, I just would have asked him a lot more questions.
Yeah. Speaking of guys, we don't even like really get any like wrap up with Gabriel, her dad. We don't like ever know what happened to him.
Yeah, and I actually had no clue about that. And then I saw in a Reddit thread, they were like, guys, by the way, what happened to Gabriel? And I was like, yeah.
Although I do wonder if that's something that they're going to explore in the next book.
What do you guys think was the worst level?
Number 4. So number 4 was gluttony, and it was when they were basically in the room with like the floor looked like a chessboard, and they were all strapped in, and if anybody moved, they started having like the swinging axe pendulums.
The pendulum, yeah.
You never knew what the checks or the X's were, or I think that they were at an advantage or disadvantage for the next game. So you had to not only like step certain places to do certain things, but then you really could see like if people were out to get you, which I thought was really spooky. And I don't like the idea of like the guy that got his arm severed off and they were like, that's gonna bleed out. Like, no, thank you. I don't like that.
For me, I know in previous episode you guys talked about how when you read what you see. I felt like some of these levels were not described well enough for me personally to envision what was going on. So I will say a lot of them were very cloudy for me. What level is the one where they're in like the bird cages?
Oh, greed, yeah.
The whole thing, I didn't fully comprehend what was going on.
I couldn't figure out what she was supposed to climb because I'm like, I thought it was super hot. Like, I agree with you. So I just checked out and like kept reading and was like, hopefully it'll be fine, because I was like, how can she see Cade? And then also like, yeah, that whole thing was
that
confusing.
one stuck out to me because I could not for the life of me figure out what was actually going on. Right, she was in a cage, but she could see the other people, and then she was climbing in my brain a mountainside. I don't know what was going on. So for me, a lot of these levels I really could not follow, and it was hard for me to hook them back to the plot. But I will say also the one that you had mentioned, that was probably the only one that made sense to me, and it almost felt like a Squid Game situation, and I think that's why I could think of it. Also, whichever one where what's his face gets splatted, are they like sitting around
in a table?
on a table? That one was mine that I was like, ooh, things are getting really out of hand, and we're actually like legitimately dying at this point.
I think it was like the uncertainty of it, right? Because like when we see the Eric guy get splat, it's like your brain can almost, I don't know, you can accept it more, or just like it's not as freaky, quote unquote, because he was like going after the protagonist, right? So you like have someone that's chasing the protagonist, that's trying to kill her, and then he's killed in the process because she's defending herself, basically. I didn't like check that off as just like this random brutal murder. I was like, that guy was trying to kill her and he got distracted by his rage, and it ended up being fatal for him. Like that was how I processed that one. And then when we get to the deceit level where they're having a cement block, I think whoever the first girl was, she like is splattered everywhere, then I was like, holy shit. When she murders Cade, or when she unalives Cade, I don't know what we can say on the internet, when she unalives Cade, I was like writing, I'm like, she's being like a little bit nuts actually, because she's like, you're literally worthless and nobody loves you and blah, blah, blah. And I had that thought. I'm like, you don't really know this guy. She's like, your legacy will be nothing, you loser. And I'm like, Ophelia, you can actually just kill him without the whole speech, because that felt really weird. This environment would bring out the worst in anyone. And unfortunately, his worst is like really, really bad. But you only know that version of him. How can you say that nobody cares about him ever on the outside?
She was also in a situation where like I felt like Ophelia was relatively, like, she was smart, she had common sense. He was after her the whole time. But I also felt like Cade was just, I don't want to sympathize with the man, but like he was just letting everybody know, like, I'm here to win. I don't know, you're a necromancer, like you could be doing something crazy. So
he thought she was a demon.
So he's just kind of like, guys, like I'm gonna have to probably kill some of you at some point, or the house is gonna kill you. And like
they're like, they've all entered this murderous house of horrors, and they're like, what? And he's like, what?
Which I thought was an interesting contrast with Ophelia, because she was like calling him out for being a jerk, but like she also was very much like, I'm not here to be friends with anybody.
He's like, I'm not here to be friends with anybody, and I might have to kill you.
And she's like, ew, gross, you're a terrible guy.
I did think that her clarification that like going to heaven or hell wasn't based on your actions as your human, but it was like your intent behind those actions. Or two people could take the exact same action, but if somebody had like malice in their heart or had ill intent, then they would go to hell. Even if your actions are harmful, but the place that you take them from is pure and loving and like wanting to be helpful, that you'll still be given peace in the afterlife. I was like, I really like that.
I think that's huge, even for here and now. I mean, you think about people that do things. I also hate to use Gypsy Blanchard as a example, but for a long time, ever since she's come out and so many other things, but if we go all the way back before all that, and we think about, a lot of people felt like, and I was one of them, that she did what she thought she had to do to get out of a bad situation. I think people do a lot of really terrible things to get out of bad situations, but they're not doing it with the intent to hurt. They're doing it because they think that that's their only option, or that's the only way out, or they are doing it with better intent. That's a great point, and it's something that even I think works in the real world.
Back to the Cade thing, like, that's what I think pulled me out of it for her with Ophelia. I was like, you're like really going in on this guy while you're murdering him or while you're unaliving him. And like, it's not coming from a place of, I am doing what I have to do to survive. Because realistically, he's got to go. Like,
right.
If you or him, bye, but like it gave it such a more sinister, like evil place in her heart that I was like, I don't want that to manifest. Knowing this with the heaven versus hell and ill intent versus malice, I was like, that just like feels gross to me.
I think it's kind of comforting to know, okay, maybe I won't go to hell though. Like maybe I'm okay to go to heaven because I at least had good intent the whole time. Which again, I guess makes sense, because I was like very weirdly having facts about Dante's Inferno, and like sometimes that like the 7 or the 9 levels of hell, the really, really bad guys go there. Like really, you got to be like really bad to go to any of those circles of hell. So I think that for the most part, most of us are going to be okay. If anybody needs to hear that.
If you need validation that you're not going to hell today, Alexander just gave it to you.
I did.
I have so many notes that are like, oh my God, I'm in love. No, because I'm in love. No, that was hot. Like, this is just like half of my things because I have such a praise kink, not to tell the whole internet, but Blackwell, like when he was like, you are doing such a good job. Before she even acknowledges that it feels good, I was like, oh my God. You keep going, Ophelia, because I need to keep hearing this validation from this main character. He was like, you're doing such a good job on this level. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, and he calls her a good girl. I was like, oh.
In like non-intimate settings. Like,
yes.
She's just like living her life. And he's like, you are doing so good. I was like, am I going to jump into this book right now?
Do we want to talk about the blood rain situation?
That was wild.
I don't know why, but that scene lives rent free in my brain. Do I want that
bloodbath?
in real life? Probably not. Absolutely not. It's like, let's talk about blood. It's sticky for one thing.
Smelly.
Probably
for sure.
would smell crazy, like crazy pennies dropping from the sky.
Also, like, whose blood is it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's manufactured blood. You know what I mean?
Right, like fake blood. This is like Phantasma fake blood.
Right. I don't know. I was like, this is wild. And also, like, to your point of like her having no experience, I don't know that virgin Chrissy back in the day would have been like, oh no, this is where we're gonna keep going. I think I would have been like, well, that ruins everything. But she was like, let's just keep this train going.
She was very first orgasm vibes. I think, okay, obviously I don't want blood rain down on me, but I liked that scene. I can see why it lives rent free in your head because we see this aggressive display of confidence from her and she's like very sure of herself. Like she's making a decision. And this is a character that struggles with decision making, that needs people to make decisions for her to feel like her shadow voice is calm. You know, she's self-conscious about her body and comparisons with her sister. And in this moment of intimacy, it's one of the first, and she comes out of her shell as Phantasma goes on, but that blood bath was the first time that she was like, no, we're rocking with this. And I think that just like display of fierce confidence was you feel like excited and you're like, hell yeah, we're rocking with this.
Yeah, I thought that scene was crazy, and then I also thought it was crazy, I can't remember after which level it was, that they are in the hallway and he just like goes down on her in the hallway. And I
thought that was crazy because she has like 15,000 layers of skirts.
Yeah, first of all, the logistics of like getting up and in there, but also
you're a phantom, but you're gonna suffocate because
first of all, I'm sweating. Like, number one, if I'm in that many layers, and I'm sweating from all of this hard work that I'm doing.
Yeah, like I've actually just been standing over boiling lava in 15 layers of skirt that is velvet, and you are like, you know what I want to eat? Like, you should wait.
Right, and then. Which that part was crazy. I didn't even think of that initially, but I was like, so this is like a person that maybe he's only ever been with the one person that we know of. And now I'm like, what if someone sees you? What if they walk out and you're like, kind of like in this, is it like it's like a exhibition? Is that the word? Yeah. It's like this, they're just like gonna, because people are gonna see.
I don't mind if people see. I don't, not like me and my phantom, but I don't want like a non-consenting people to see, like, you know what I mean? I never want someone to like stumble upon it, but like I'm not a kink shamer. I just think like if you're in the middle of the hallway, I was like, anybody could walk in on this,
and that'll put you on a list.
Can you imagine you're just trying to go to the library and you're like, oh, you're like Blackwell.
You make a really good point of like non-consenting people walking in. There's like a sense of thrill, like that's a kink, that's a thing. But yeah. You're absolutely right. Who is walking on you and everything, but I don't know. We're also, again, there's no laws in Phantasma. Like we're just out here doing whatever and hoping we don't die.
I was into the fact I liked that she could just say his name like Beetlejuice and he would show up. I wish that could happen in real life, and somebody would just be there to help you.
Matt would be so annoyed if I could do that. Like if I could, he would never get a moment of peace in his day.
God, what a terrible power that would be for me to have. Because like you said, I would just be like, Sherman, I don't think I can do this. And it would literally be either like I'm at Costco and I'm having a mental breakdown over what box of chips to buy. No.
Like, should I get ground coffee or Keurig coffee? And he would be like, he's like in a towel in Costco because he's like, I was actually taking a shower.
And oftentimes I think I can work out most things if I just take a second and then I slow down. I think that's like my anxiety makes me second guess myself. So I think if I just slow down, it'll be fine. So the poor man would be standing in a towel in Costco and I'd be like, you know, by the time you materialized, I actually figured it out.
She kind of like comes to that realization too, which I like. Like, she is like, you know, I can do these things without you. Some of them, though, I was like, okay, you're also in a house of horrors. Like, you do need to summon him. Like, she was a little bit stubborn at the beginning, and I was like, Ophelia, be so for real right now.
And she wouldn't summon him because she didn't trust him right away. But I guess, just must be the most gullible person, because I would immediately trust him and I'd immediately take his help to help get me through these haunted house levels.
Well, I mean, if I walk into a boiling room of lava and people are like burning alive, I'm just gonna summon the ghost, because like, what is my other alternative that I think this through? The amount of notes in here as I'm scrolling through my Kindle that are like, put pants on, where are pants? Because literally she just continues. She's like, I also have a note that says, does she never pee after sex? Is she not worried about UTIs?
Well, also, again, she's a newbie. This is new to her. She wouldn't know that. Someone would have to teach her. And clearly a fandom that's a million years old would also not know about UTIs and such.
Yeah, he can't even remember anything outside of the house. She has so many UTIs by the time she leaves Phantasma, guys. I'm telling you, she has a kidney disease.
It hurts to tinkle.
She's like, things are hurting me. And I'm like, you actually just haven't peed after sex in 9 days.
Also, okay, wait. Back to the pants thing. Sorry.
The way I would just do Phantasma in my underwear, like, I'm like, this isn't worth the skirts getting caught and tripping so much.
Not that pants don't exist, men wear pants, but were there pants? Again, I'm assuming this is Regency era. I was considering Bridgerton, even with the pictures of the how they drew it. Were women, I don't want to say allowed to wear pants, that sounds crazy, but like, was that a thing?
I like don't think so. But he's 500 centuries older than her. But he speaks like only a little bit older. Like he doesn't use the verbiage of like someone who was born 500 years before her. And also, I was like, wouldn't he be in like a caveman getup? 500 years is so many years.
That, I mean, you make a really good point. And also, yeah, why couldn't we write her right here with pants on? Why couldn't we just have her wear? I mean, I know they were still wearing dresses to ride horses and stuff, but like, somewhere in this time, you know what?
Somebody has pants.
And then she rips them at one point for one of the levels, but then she doesn't continue to do that for the next set of levels, which I would have thought you would just be like, oh, I figured out that I can actually get over the issues with the 17 layers of skirt and tripping if I just cut them off. And then she didn't do that.
No, she was like, I'm just gonna keep, I mean, props to her. She's like, I'm still gonna look good. No,
right. Yeah, you know what? Fair. Pants were not an option. Oh, pants were not an option. Christina's confirmed.
That's so wild. The Whispering Gate, I do think it's interesting that, and I didn't know if it was an OCD tie or not, but the 2 times that she summons the Whispering Gate, I know someone on the other side wants to talk to her, but her ability to go in and summon it was 2 times that she was like almost desperately clawing for more information. Like, they were like 2 stressful times where she like, there was something very unknown that was like torturing her. But like the second time, it was, she had just found out that Gabriel was her dad. She didn't really know, like, so she almost gets like this information dumped on her that she doesn't have full clarity on. And both of those times are times that those are the times she accidentally summons the Whispering Gate. I don't know if that was an OCD tie or not, but I thought that was cool.
No, I thought that part was cool too, and I wasn't sure if that was something that could have potentially tied back with her being a necromancer. And I told Cecilia earlier, I was kind of confused at some points because we were told that she was a necromancer, and then I didn't really like understand how that played out because we didn't get a lot of points with that.
I didn't put the OCD thing in there, but that makes a lot of sense. I was leaning more towards it being that she hasn't quite got a full handle on her necromancy powers. So it could be both. It could almost be like there was that anxiety OCD trigger and she doesn't know how to harness that yet with her powers to open that gate. But yeah, I also want to say I don't feel like we got anything about her being a necromancer at all, besides it being my mom's dead and I took her powers, and also my dad did this other thing and that made me powerful and blah blah blah. Like at no point did I feel like she really used her powers for anything. I know like her mom used it as like a business, as a, you know, bringing somebody back or speaking to somebody, and like maybe she didn't have those sort of opportunities within Phantasma. But yeah, for sure, her being a necromancer felt like something that was just in the background.
She finishes level 8 and then she's just like, all right, show me the Prince of Devils because I'm done. And I was like, that's not how this works. Like, you have to, you're not the winner. And then she's like demanding a prize. Like, I was like, the audacity of this girl, because she just summons the door at level 8. And I was like, well, if you're gonna do this, you could have just done this at level 2. Like, what are you doing? And also then for her to be like, grant me my wish, you didn't win. Like, there are other people here still. That was crazy.
And not only that, but the level 9 was treachery, or was supposed to be treachery. And then again, like we talked about it earlier, Blackwell was mean for like half of a second, but there was no, like, the treachery was just that you didn't know his true identity.
No, like, that was treacherous for me. The fact that he was mean to us for a second was that was the worst level of all.
And I know that it would not have been, like, I would not have enjoyed the ending of the book if it was like this, but if it was gonna be treachery, he should have been fooling her the whole time. He should have been using her the whole
Fair.
time. And then it was like, he was just kidding. Like, it was kind of like, no, not happening. So I thought that the ending, like you said, it was rushed. She just like decided she was going to win. We're skipping level 9. And then she has this conversation with him, and then it's over. Like, everybody, like, Phantasma's falling apart because you figured it out. What happened to all the other people that were still there?
I think they all just went home. Like, I think she cheated her way to win it, and that was it. But yeah, to your point, I do think you said it earlier about how the author went to sleep and came back and forgot what she was doing, because yeah, there was no treachery. The treachery would have been if he was the whole time when he was actually like, I actually don't care about you. I just wanted to use you because I knew you'd be soft enough to help me get out of here. I knew that you would use your wish to get me out of here, and I don't care about you. And like, that's how it ended. That would have been absolutely wild. I understand we were writing a romance, so that's not how we wanted it to end. But I agree. The ending overall felt very rushed, and like she just needed to tie it up. I don't know if she was on a deadline or something, and she was like, oops, just realized I actually turn this in tomorrow.
The reason, like, I think, like you said earlier, like, people inherently, we have a fear of being alone. Like, humans can't be alone. Like, think of why we have solitary confinement in prisons, right? Like, that is a punishment because your brain physically can't handle it. So for the entire book to be about people's biggest fears, and you're going into this haunted house where the fears are used against you, to have, I think, like you said, an ultimate fear of being alone, being betrayed, you had an opportunity to use that. And would it have changed the ending of the book drastically? Yes. And people probably would not have liked it, which
I, for one, would have hated it.
Same. And I understand why she didn't go there, but I think that like, again, and not even for shock value, like, this is a point where she could have done that in this book and I would have been like, okay, that's not a shock value change for me, because that is a fear manifesting itself coming true, that you've like trusted this person on a physical and emotional, like, mental level, and now that person has betrayed you and it was never real all along. Like, that's a true fear, and a lot of people are afraid of that and have had that happen to them. So I again, like, I'm so happy that they were together forever, of course, but I thought that and the ending could have been something like way different with that. But again, I would have hated it. So what do I know?
The end with Angel and the soul being the same soul ex. I literally texted you guys and I was like, I hate this plot twist. Like, and then my next note is, oh, okay, he never remembers either. Never mind. So it's like, fine then, I guess, because he like never knows either that it's technically her soul. So that's what makes it forgivable.
And I was glad that you texted us, because for me, that was another part of the story that was a little bit confusing context wise. I wasn't sure what was happening with the like locket.
When you brought this to the chat, I was also I must have skimmed or something, because I remember the importance, but I, for some reason, thought, because doesn't it come off at some point and she's like,
yeah,
right,
her
she
heart
just
is
dies.
like slowing.
So I guess in my brain initially, I thought it was just like, once she became that, like, her mom had to wear it to stay alive, and then when she became the necromancer, she had to wear it to stay alive. So
what does it contain? were they all Angel's soul at one point that like it just been cycled through until Blackwell met her? Like, I think that that's actually what it was. Her soul is kept in there and it's connected to the body that it's in. But it's the reason that they chose the Grimm family is because they're necromancers that would stay away from Phantasma for like so long, but that there's a shot there that eventually somebody would probably go into Phantasma. So then I'm like, was Tessie in there with Blackwell and had the soul in her and just happened to fall in love with Gabriel instead? Like, that was a part that I just thought was not explained well, because I'm sure there's a meaning. I just don't understand. Like, at first I thought it was okay that the soul got gifted in the locket and then it was eventually dumped into Ophelia and she's the only one that had Angel's soul ever. But then I'm like, how would her mom have known that she couldn't remove the necklace?
There are so many small plots within the plot and things really, especially towards the end when the author's trying to wrap it up, I think it gets a little muddy, a little foggy. I just think there's just too many things going on.
Yeah, like there's souls everywhere. Gabriel is somewhere. He killed their mother, and then they're all like, whoa, that's crazy. Let's move on.
Your explanation makes more sense to me, because when she talks about the locket here, she says, my own heart beats in it. So she's describing it as her heart in the necklace. But like your explanation of a soul being passed down makes much more sense to me.
Like, is it holding her soul and then it's eventually released, or does it everyone had Angel's soul? Like, poor Angel, just let this woman rest.
Any final thoughts on Phantasma or Biggest Fears in general?
You know what's funny is I think I rated this initially somewhere in like the 4-star range, but now that we've dissected it, I don't like it as much as I initially did. I do still love Blackwell. I do love the romance aspect. I did like the spice level. I didn't think it was too much. I really enjoyed the book overall, but now that we've talked about it more, like there's definitely a lot of plot holes and a lot of things that I wish the author would have done differently. But like we've said, I do like the representation of OCD. I think it was a very interesting way to go about it. It was not something that I've read before, and it felt like the author at least understood OCD to a point enough to write about it. So I did appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it. You know, I thought it was a cool concept. I thought she was very creative, the author, with her thoughts on the levels of hell and the different games and stuff. And I think this is, her first book, or one of her first. So I think she did the mental health and OCD thing really well, which is like authors that have been writing for years and years and years still don't hit it very accurately. So I definitely commend her for that. And I'll read the second one, you know, and I'm excited to get to know Genevieve more, because I just really think that by the end of the book, I was like, wait, I think this girl is actually like really cool. So I'm excited to be in her head for the next book and see where that goes.
I just want to say thank you so much, Chrissy, for joining us today. I loved hearing your insight. I loved having you on the podcast. And again, if you want to follow Chrissy, you can find her on Instagram and TikTok at sugar_N as in Nancy _smut. You can also find her Etsy shop, Morally Grey Designs, on Etsy, obviously, and also Instagram. And then you can find her narration account on Instagram as well, and that is at Daisy Morgan Narrates. So thank you so much for joining us. I had so much fun. I'm so happy that we got to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. It takes a lot of emotional energy and it takes a lot of time to come and film, like we know. So I really appreciate you doing it, and you were such an awesome guest, and I'm excited for your episode.
Thank you guys so much. I loved every second of this. So thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. No.
Also, thanks again for tuning into Shelf Absorbed Podcast. You can find us on all of the places where you can get a podcast, such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And we release episodes once a month, but we may release episodes at different times because I got knocked up. So
Amen.